a poll that was done in 2002 said that American girls, 80% of American girls had been on a diet before age 10.
Wow.
That's staggering.
Wow.
Before age 10. So these ideas are not new to our kids. They're affecting them at a very young age. There are already ideas in their head that even their very young, very prepubescent body is somehow flawed.
Mental health challenges are often kept in the closet or even swept under the rug. We know they can affect anyone, from adults to children, and the struggle is real. Join us as we talk about relevant topics with mental health experts. Welcome to Equip Online, a place for hope and help.
Well, welcome to Equip Online. I'm Wally, and this is Brian. And today we've got a special guest that Brian will introduce in just a second, Brittany Gilchrist, who's going to talk to us about body image and the impact that it has in today's culture. So, Brian, you want to introduce Brittany?
Absolutely. So, Brittany, I do have to say first and foremost that we have, it's kind of exciting having you, Brittany, because your husband happens to be the youth pastor of our church, Chris.
Yeah.
So that's kind of extra special for us here at StoneBridge, kind of neat. But Brittany is a licensed professional counselor with a certification in eating disorders. You really have a specialty in working with those who struggle with eating disorders. And you've worked several years as a counselor, and you've worked with adolescents and adults in various levels of intensive care. About 2.5 years ago, she founded her own private practice called Peace and Purpose Counseling. And again, you hold let's see if I can say this right, certified eating disorders specialist. So you've actually got a thank you. That's a mouthful. But you've gotten a certification, something you're passionate about for sure.
Yeah, and, there's a lot of work.
Yeah. And so I know that kind of really leads us in even to our topic, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But hey, Brittany, before we do that, anything else in 60 seconds or less, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to be a part of this conversation. I love the intersection between mental health and faith. I think it's so important. And so I'm excited to be able to do this with you guys. As you said, I have an awesome husband and a new-ish mom. I have a 1.5-year-old, and I've always been passionate about working in the mental health fields, but I would say becoming a mom made me feel even more passionate about the world that we're raising these young people in and how to, continue to be able to help them navigate some of these topics.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany. Well, so today's topic is about body image. And I think it's such a relevant topic because of the world we live in. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and kind of how this world is different than, I'm a Gen Xer. Are you a baby boomer officially?
I'm just old.
You're just old. So we grew up in different generations, but there's some unique things that we'll get into this generation. But, as I think about body image, even on the top of my head, it's rare to find an individual who will look at themselves in the mirror and think, man, I just love every single aspect of my body. I mean, I just am like perfect. Wow, this is awesome, right? I mean, I really think that whether you're an adult or a child, we have struggles with this, right? There's
Absolutely.
we can be so negative about ourselves and embracing, who we've been created to be. And so I think this is a really interesting topic. And so we're going to just jump on in there. And Wally, I'm going to ask you to kick us off if we get this discussion going.
Yeah, so the term body image, when we use that term, Brittany, in your expertise, what is it that we're talking about? What does that encompass? And then secondly, how big, I know it's a big thing for you because you kind of specialize in this, but how big of a deal is it in our culture today? Especially for teens, what we're looking at.
Right. It's a great question. So body image is our mental picture of our size, shape, appearance. It's how we feel about our body. It's how we feel in our body. And it also can include our perceived belief or understanding about how other people see our bodies. And I emphasize perceive because most of the time we have no idea how other people see our bodies. We're mind reading. And that's kind of where the comparison comes in. We're mind reading where we fall as compared to other people, but that mind reading can take up so much mental space. Mm-hmm. And Brian, as you alluded, there's a really vast spectrum of body image. It's not good or bad necessarily. Those aren't the only two categories. There's a lot of gray. So I like to think of it, a lot of my clients, of course, have very, very, very negative body image and are very disassociated or disconnected from their body. And so we're just maybe starting on one end of the spectrum, which is tolerance for your body, to tolerate your body. And then it's acceptance, and then all the way to compassion. And so lots of gray there. And then to answer your question about how big of a deal is this? That's a really important question, I think, because sometimes body image can be sort of minimized into a vanity issue, or we don't want to talk about it because we want to put those ideas in our kids' heads or things like that. But the average, a poll that was done in 2002 said that American girls, 80% of American girls had been on a diet before age 10.
Wow.
That's staggering.
Wow.
Before age 10. So these ideas are not new to our kids. They're affecting them at a very young age. There are already ideas in their head that even their very young, very prepubescent body is somehow flawed. And then if you think about that all the way juxtaposed to sort of the end of life, the New York Times did a study of nursing homes and interviewed people nearing the end of their life. And what were some of the regrets that they had at the end of their life? And the number one answer was the time I spent hating my body. Number one. And so that just really paints this picture of this. It's not a minor issue. It's not, something that just certain people are being affected by. It's often a lifelong issue that if we can, and of course we'll talk more about this piece too, but if we can really help educate and provide good care for this, we can slow or minimize or even erase, in some cases, a lifelong issue.
Yeah, that is staggering. Even just hearing those statistics about, how young it starts, and even a life looking back over your whole life reflecting is pretty sobering to think about how big of an issue this is. And, I've seen it, to your point too, that, even I think about kind of a basic command as a Christian is this whole idea of love your neighbor as yourself. And I feel like there's something too in this idea of body image where if we don't learn to love and accept ourselves, our body, who we are, it impacts our relationships too. You can just see that is just so foundational to us, even integrating relationally into the world. And so, I think it's such an important thing. So kind of to build on that too, kind of help paint a picture, I guess, if you would, Brittany. I know you work with a lot of different ages, but you've worked a lot with teens and adolescents. Help us to kind of understand what is this generation of teens facing in their world that's kind of unique, that's different than maybe what I would have grown up in, or someone really old like Wally would have grown up. Sorry. But just help us to paint that picture. It's good to kind of appreciate that perspective a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, so bullying and peer pressure and, emphasis on appearance and things like that, that's not new. We all knew that. We all grew up around that. But to your point, yes, I do think the climate is very different because even, for instance, when I was growing up, there was this window, there was this safe space, so perhaps I experienced some of that bullying at school, but then I would go home and I would have this, 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock window of time where I had a break from that. I had relief from that. You weren't feeling those pressures as much. And our young people just don't have that anymore. They have this constant onslaught of information. It's in their pocket. It's on their phone. It's, it's coming in at all times. And so that really paints a different picture for our young people today of how to navigate this conversation, because there aren't those built-in safe spaces that many of us had, hopefully growing up. And that, yes, of course, I'm mostly alluding to social media in that case, but I think it's also important to speak to the media in general aspect of this. So, for instance, when we think about commercials and movies and things like that, we're learning from a very early age these connections between these products and happiness. So, let's say I'm trying to sell mascara. Those commercials are showing the girl putting on the mascara, and then she has all these friends and she's happy and she seems, walking down the street feeling good about herself or whatever it may be. But that starts to make this connection that if I do this to look good, then I will be happy. And so I think, a lot of our work is starting to pull apart some of those connections of happiness is so much more than that, is so much deeper than that. And how do we start to make sure that it doesn't get so wrapped up in our body image?
Yeah, no, that's so good. And Brittany, I remember we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned a story about Cindy Crawford.
Yeah,
that was it. Tell me, just share that again. Kind of what happened in that story. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in helping our young people feel like more educated consumers of the information that they're receiving. So, one of the stories I like to share with my clients sometimes is the story of Cindy Crawford, and she's flipping through a magazine and she comes across a picture of herself and she starts crying. And this is a true story. I don't know if I should just share that, but, and she comes across a picture of herself and she starts crying and says, "I don't look like that." And I think that really shows the weight of, when my clients or our kids or these, individuals are looking through magazines, looking at media, there's so much work being done. There's so many teams and people in place to make somebody look different than they are, that when they are saying, "I don't look like XYZ," I'm saying, neither does Cindy Crawford. She's looking at herself and she doesn't look like that. And so really helping, our young people understand that what they're looking at isn't real, that it's literally not a human necessarily that they're looking at. And that can be a helpful way for them to begin to process that the comparisons that they're maybe falling into are just very largely unrealistic.
That's so good.
So you said a word earlier, safe place. And I think about that just, how as parents there's really no way that it seems impossible in today's society with all the tools that we have. I mean, you mentioned magazines. You go to the checkout at the grocery store and there's Glamour magazine. I haven't bought one. But there's all these images, that are there. And then you've got a cell phone, so you can be bullied through texting, or you can find media that presents this unrealistic image. And so as you look at all those things, if I'm a parent coming in, how would you coach me if my child was struggling with these thoughts today in their world?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point that we can't live in a bubble. We can't fully remove ourselves from these kinds of things. I did a talk in Houston a few years back, and I was driving to Houston, about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on the traffic kind of drive. And I thought, just out of curiosity, I'm going to see how many billboards I can count on the way to Houston that have something to do with food or body. And I was at by the end of my drive, about 35 to 40 billboards. So that's almost one a minute that had to do with something related to food or body. So you're right, Wally, we can't fully remove ourselves no matter what we were trying to do. It's just not realistic. And so that's why I say I'm a big proponent of education around the media that is being consumed. That being said, I am also a proponent of limits and structure and parents, placing limits and boundaries on phone use, on media intake. My husband, Chris, and I have limits that we put on ourselves for our phones and, wanting to make sure that we're being present with our son and with each other. And I mean, we're not teenagers. So much more our teenagers need those limits. For instance, I certainly would not encourage teens to be sleeping with their media, with their phones. There's so much room for unmonitored activity and, of course, disrupting sleep and things like that. So that being said, I do encourage limits, but as far as not being able to keep people fully away from it, absolutely. And so that's where the education, the story about Cindy Crawford can be helpful to share that with your kids. Dove Beauty Campaign has done a lot of work, and maybe we can even link to some of their stuff too, but they've done a lot of work around videos that will show the model beforehand and then all the way to what you're seeing at the end and the drastic difference of what people are intaking at the end of that product. And so being able to really talk through that with your kid of what you are seeing, what you're taking in is not real, and you're not comparing yourself to something that is real.
So, Brittany, I remember, and I'm struggling right now trying to figure out where I read this, but it may have been James Dobson met a young man who had a birthmark that took up a good portion of his face. And he was one of the most confident young men that Dobson had met. And he just asked him about that. And he said, well, my dad told me that when I was born, that heaven was so excited that an angel reached down and kissed me. And that's the mark that it left.
Wow.
So I'm thinking of the power of a parent, in the lives of their children. And how do we have that impact? How do we, so that's where my mind is going. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, I love that. I love that perspective shift. I love, like you said, that so much of this work can be done in the home and can be done in that parent-child relationship. There are a couple things I really like to emphasize when, like you said, kind of coaching parents through some of this. And one of those is how we talk about bodies in general. So, I sit across from a lot of young girls who will say, my mom never would have said something negative about my body. She always would have told me it was beautiful. But she had a lot of negative things to say about her own body. And everybody says we look similar. So what does that mean about my body? And so I'll really encourage parents, it's not just about what you're speaking about your kid's body, but it's also how you're speaking about your own body or your coworkers' bodies or your friends' bodies. That when we are talking about body positivity, it's for everybody, it's for all bodies. And that is really helpful kind of way to frame it, especially for young people. And the other thing I really like to emphasize is validation. I'm going to steal somebody else's story. My previous supervisor, when I was new to counseling, wrote a book on validation, and she shared this story in her book. But she shares that her daughter came up to her and said, "Mama, I am feeling really bad about my body." She was young, like at the time, maybe 10 years old. "I'm feeling really bad about my body." And Melissa is the name of my former supervisor. She and her family, they're all very tall. And so her daughter was saying, "I'm taller than all the other girls. I just feel very different." And everything in Melissa was wanting to argue with her, right? Like, don't say that about your body. That's not nice to say about your body, all of that. But what probably would have happened if she said that is then her 10-year-old would have just started kind of arguing with her, right? And it wouldn't have been super productive. And so she leaned down and she said, "It's really hard to feel separate and different from your peers. That's a really lonely feeling." And her daughter kind of looked at her and took that in, and she said, yeah, I feel really lonely." And Melissa and her kind of sat there. She gave her a hug and she said, "Mama, do you think I'm big? Do you think I'm fat?" And Melissa said, "No, I don't, baby, but I do know what that feels like. I do know how hard that can be." And her daughter goes, "Okay, can I have some ice cream?" And because I love that story, because Melissa was able to diffuse the situation by validating her daughter's feelings. And so that's the other thing I really encourage parents, is to validate. I mean, Brian, just the way that you were kind of sharing at the beginning, that this is hard for a lot of people, and that those feelings come up and are okay and are valid and real. And yes, of course, then we can go into, but your body does wonderful things, or your body is wonderful, or things like that. But it can be so helpful to start by really validating their emotions and helping them understand that those feelings are very natural and hard to process.
Yeah, Wally and I, getting to be a part of Equip, we're getting quite an education as well, which is secretly we're doing this because we need a lot of help, really, is the bottom line. No, but I mean, validation has seemed to be a theme that has really come up a lot. I think it's just a powerful, powerful tool, because we just want to immediately go to try to fixing the problem.
Absolutely.
But there's something about that connection that you experience together when you take that validation step. It's so powerful. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I'm thinking too, Brittany, that, as a parent, kind of building on this, I imagine you can, as a mom or dad, you get hit with different things. Maybe you get hit with stuff like your child comes up and just, I don't like how my body looks, or, I noticed, maybe it's a comment about my thighs are fat, these kind of things. I think you're alluding to some really great ways, again, to validate. If we were to build on that, are there some proactive strategies that, are good for parents to practice and helping them to kind of see their body in a positive way? What would be some of those strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I do like to emphasize the way that bodies are talked about in the home in general. And I like to emphasize validation. And then I love to go into some practical strategies that can be used. So for instance, when your son or daughter brings up that they're struggling with this, and again, a lot of this is maybe after you have validated that emotion, talking about, why do you feel this way? Going a little deeper, helping your child understand where that thought is coming from, like with the with the ice cream story I just shared, that, the daughter was feeling separate from her peers. She was comparing herself to her peers because she had something specifically that made her feel different. And I hear that a lot, something that makes you feel separate from the people around you. And it may not have anything to do with weight. It may be something else. And so helping your child process through that and be a safe place to work through some of those thoughts and feelings. Another one I think can be helpful, again, depending on the age, but what are you believing would change if you looked the way that you wanted to? What are you trying to achieve here? What are you trying to get out of this? And this kind of goes back to what I was sharing about the media and commercials. Are you believing that that would get you acceptance? Are you believing that would get you love? Are you believing that would get you happiness? That's really helpful, because then we can talk about that need on a deeper level, perhaps, than, just simply changing your body. If we were to go back to some of the research that's being done, and even probably we all kind of know this organically, that most of the time when people do make drastic efforts to change their bodies, it doesn't get them that result that they're wanting. They're still unsatisfied. They're not necessarily getting the happiness or the acceptance or the love that they thought was going to be on the other side of that. And so working through some of that with our children, helping them understand that. What's a part of your body that you do like? Is there something about your body that you do love? I like this question because it helps us move away from some of the black and white thinking again. We, especially our young people, can get caught up in it's all bad or it's all good and there's no in between. And so I like trying to even start the conversation of, is there something that you do like? Is there something that you do love? Is there something in between these two extremes? One of my favorites is thinking about all the awesome things that your body can do for you. We're often so preoccupied with the way it looks, but it is working all the time to keep us healthy, keep us functioning, keep us breathing, keep blood pumping. I do a lot of values work with my clients, so I like to help them identify what their top values are. My top values are family. My top values are faith, friendships, caring for others, compassion, those kinds of things. What are your top values? And so I'll kind of go back to the values work there. And what does your body allow you to do as far as being our most important vehicle for meeting our values, for working towards our values? So, Brian, if you were to tell me my top values are my friendships and my faith, and we'll throw in like painting. Let's say you just took up painting.
Nice. My daughter would be laughing right now because she's the artist. Yeah.
So then we might go into, well, as far as relationships, your body allows you to hug people, and your brain allows you to be able to pay attention when they're talking. And as far as your faith, your body allows you to worship, and your body allows you to participate in ministry. And as far as painting, your body allows you to paint and create and, give back to the community through that beautiful gift that you just developed. But, going back to all the things that our body is constantly doing to help us live fulfilling lives. Another one I like is body positive affirmations. So that is things like, my body is beautiful. My body is enough. My body is capable. My body is wonderful. And, of course, when I first bring that up with a client, and you guys might even be going there mentally, the client is thinking, I don't believe that though. So what's the point? I don't believe that. And your kid might say that back to you. It probably will. And I say, yeah, not today. But it's the same thing with the negative thoughts about your body. If you had one negative thought about your body and never had it again, it probably wouldn't hold very much weight, right? Probably wouldn't impact you very much. It gains power in the repetition. It gains power because you have now repeated it to yourself over and over and over again. And so it's the same thing with the positive body affirmations. They gain power in the repetition. Today they feel phony baloney, but they won't always, and I like the idea of a parent and kid doing them together. You're both sitting there, maybe in front of the mirror, maybe not, whatever feels better. But, doing them together, it's sort of accountability, a team effort. And then I kind of touched on this one already, but I think your body is wonderful. Of course, this is after validating the emotion. And then I think all bodies are wonderful. Let's talk about how all bodies contribute to society and contribute to the beautiful picture of what we see around us. And then kind of one last one is, reminding our kids your worth, your value, it's never going to be measured in a clothing size or goal weight. Let's talk about where your worth and value really comes from. Let's talk about the, amazing gift that you are, and really help shifting away from that is where your identity or your value can be found.
Brittany, I remember my wife had got a book for my children when they My Wonderful, I can't remember what the next word was, Body, My Wonderful Machine, something like that. Cool. When the kids were little.
Yeah.
I mean, how early is it something, let's say that our kids that we're not aware that they're struggling with this right now? Is it a subject we even broach, or do we begin to be proactive with books like that for our children?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's not too early, and that some of the examples I just gave are deeper. They're going to take more of the teenage brain, but certainly talking about what our bodies can do for us, listening to our bodies, engaging with our bodies. It might sound silly, but I do that with my 1.5-year-old already. I say like, oh, that was such a good job that you just listened to your body when it told you that it was thirsty, or, when he grabs his water bottle and things like that, talking in that perspective. Like that statistic said, this is happening so early. And I've had very young clients, that are already dealing with so much as far as this goes. And so really as early as we can start having some of the body positive conversations, the better.
Yeah, I love that. As we begin to kind of wrap up, it's always just good just to kind of talk about our takeaways. Yeah. I know for me, some things that stand out, Brittany, and just so many, but even that statement you made, a couple of them, even in the way you approach it, you can't immediately jump to full acceptance and compassion for your body, but even to start with tolerance, I think is a good word about this is a journey. Not going to, if you're having real struggles with here, we just need to be patient with that. So that was a huge takeaway from me. And I love that question about if you were to change all these things with your body, what do you think that would accomplish for you? Because I do think part of it too is exposing that we have some really false beliefs that are going on here. Again, about, these people we're looking at, again, that's not really them. And even if I could look like that, do I really think that's going to make me happy, and why? I just think those are such great conversations to get into as parents, and validating, and then really helping to bring that affirmation over that journey. So I've loved this conversation. So Wally, anything for you?
Well, yeah, as you talked with me about an old guy looking back, it is a little bit different perspective. I mean, I really think about, from my perspective as a parent, probably the most valuable thing that I can do is to take time to detach from everything else so that I have time just to be in my child's presence, so that, I can be building into them, but also that I can be paying attention when they have those questions. and in today's society, it's really hard to do that when we're so entertainment driven and so many opportunities, 600 channels on cable to watch sports. Of course, now, the sport you're watching is Fortnite during this COVID, but I really think about that and just think that if I could counsel younger dads, it would be to say, take time to spend with your child and look at that as even if a meaningful conversation comes up or not, just being there with them will allow the likelihood of those conversations to come up to be much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wrap up, Brittany, is there a final little thought or challenge you'd want to throw out there? I'd love to just give you an opportunity as we wrap up. Any final thought for us?
Yeah, I want to say thank you guys for letting me be a part of this conversation. Again, I love the work that y'all are doing to help bridge the conversation between mental health and faith. And, I hope that these things were helpful. And as parents, we're always trying to do the best we can for our kids, and any kind of takeaways or things that may be helpful for your family specifically, may be different than my family necessarily, but I think we can all draw from this conversation and hopefully help provide a world for our young people where they feel really safe and secure and comfortable with the beautiful bodies that God has given them.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know it's been a really, really great topic, and we want to thank you for watching. And Brittany, also just want to, if someone watching right now wanted to learn more about this, or they wanted to connect with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, that's great. So we'll link some resources that I like to use in the office, some workbooks for teens and adults and things like that, so that people have that information. And then my website is www.peaceandpurposecounseling.com. You want to reach out to me via email or phone through there. You are hearing this and thinking maybe you'd like some help for your kid or adolescent or yourself or whoever, then those are all great ways to get a hold of me. Awesome.
Well, thanks. We just want to thank you for joining us, and want to mention that Equip Online is a partnership between StoneBridge Church and Mosaics of Mercy. Mosaics of Mercy is an awesome nonprofit here in Montgomery County, and their heart is to be a mental health resource hub, just to help people find support groups, counselors, all kinds of great resources for you to take some next steps. We also, as Brittany mentioned, we have a website, Equip Online. We would encourage you to check out to learn more about how to take some next steps and learn more about these topics we talk about. And as always, we just want to encourage you. Our desire is that you would walk in the fullness of life that you've been created for. God bless you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. We're really passionate about shedding light on mental health. If you found this discussion helpful or beneficial, be sure to like and share the video. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, and don't forget to ding that notification bell so you know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next time.